Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 159 of the podcast. In this episode, I talk with Reed Moore. Reed was the student pastor at Gwinnett Church for years after starting in middle school there and then leading all of student ministry, and then now is the student director at Passion City Church. And that transition was basically happening when we recorded this interview, so he's a few weeks into that role now. But we have a great conversation all about student ministry leadership and culture. I love the things he talks about with key language for creating culture, student leaders, sharing stories, hallway hustle, probably one of my favorite things he mentions in here. It's just a great interview. You're going to love that. Now, before we get into that, a couple things to note. One, Ministry Boost is hosting a free online event that is all about volunteers. It's called Volunteer Boot Camp. We're going to have 5 or 6 sessions from different voices that you're going to love, talking all about volunteers, recruiting, onboarding, encouraging, retaining, training, all of that. And I'm really excited. We've got some great voices like Dan Scott, Christine Kreischer, Nina Schmidgall, Paula Danielle, John Berkmeyer, who was on the podcast recently, and he'll talk even more about the same thing that he talked about when he was on the podcast. That's happening Wednesday, August 28th. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, whatever your time is in there. It'll be about a 2.5-hour online event. And you can learn more about that and register for that free event at ministryboost.org/bootcamp. We'll probably give some free stuff away. We're still kind of figuring out what that's going to be, and I'm sure it'll be lots of great stuff. So you don't want to miss that for sure. A number of episodes ago, we had Kyle Price on, and we talked about student ministry programming, and the email exclusive was going to be Kyle's programming checklist. That is finally ready for you. If you want to get that, and all the email exclusives, just make sure you subscribe, which you can do in the show notes. Go to nickblevins.com/episode 159. We'll have the notes and everything for this episode, links, and a way to subscribe so you get those emails. Now, for this episode, the email exclusive, I'm going to give you a link to what might be my favorite vision casting video in terms of recruiting volunteers that I've ever seen. And it's something Gwinnett Church did where Reed Moore was, to recruit volunteers for Transit, Transit's their middle school ministry, celebrating and following the journey of a couple new middle school volunteers and what that was like for them that first year. I mean, it's just powerful. To this day, I don't even know how old it is, probably a few years old. It stands out as probably my favorite video that I've ever seen to help cast a vision for recruiting volunteers. So I'll give you a link to that in the email exclusive. So make sure you sign up to get those. Well, there you go. That's all I have. Let's jump in now to my interview with Reed Moore, all about student ministry leadership and culture. Today, I'm talking with Reed Moore. Welcome to the podcast, Reed.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, man.
You bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and you got a big change going on in your role, in your life at church. So we're at Gwinnett, you're going to Passion. Tell us all about that.
Yes. So, I'm actually a Gwinnett County kid. So, I'm in Gwinnett currently, living there, which is right outside of Atlanta, and I'm married. I got 2 kids. I got a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy, and we have one on the way, which is exciting. And just recently, as of 2 weeks ago, accepted the job to go from being the student pastor at Gwinnett Church to being the student pastor at Passion City Church.
Yep. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, man.
Quite the influence Passion has. I was just saying before we start recording how the conference is back. I went in 2001, 2, 3.
Yeah.
We're just so huge in my life, like tremendously. And even Louis, like when Louis did 722 at North Point, and I just watched it from afar, because my friend introduced me to it. He had moved down there and was attending. It was like, you got to watch it. And it's funny because to me that's way before like churches were streaming. I mean, there's probably some, but like here's me in 2003 or 4 or whatever it was, streaming stuff online was nothing like today where that's just normal. You know what I mean?
Oh, so for sure. Yeah. You had to scrounge the internet to try to find a sermon or something like that.
So I do have to say, you're pretty lucky. You get to go from Gwinnett Church, Jeff Henderson, that amazing staff, that amazing church, to Passion City with Louis. You're quite
of course,
blessed.
yeah. It's like, what in the world? Yeah, no, I'm still like, pinching myself because it's been, to me, the opportunity of a lifetime, one, to get to work with Jeff Henderson at Gwinnett Church. It's been incredible just to get to be a part of, moving into that building in Gwinnett. And then Gwinnett, just this past year launched another campus in the county. It's a huge county, 60,000 high school students. So kind of, planting another campus there. So I got to be a part of that, which was awesome. And then to have, Passion reach out, and for us to be able to be a part of that is incredible.
Yeah, and you're starting soon here.
Yeah,
so you're right in the middle of the transition.
Monday, so
that's great. Well, I want to talk about a variety of topics that you and I kind of kicked around before we decided to, pick some, and I kind of picked all of them. But let's start with this one. And I know this is just from knowing North Point ministry churches and all those things. You have such a great culture for volunteers, for staff, and all of that. Tell me some tips. Like, what are some ways you created the staff and the volunteer culture you wanted there with Gwinnett students?
Yeah. I think that, looking at Gwinnett students, I think that's actually like the culture on the team and amongst the volunteers is kind of the secret sauce of like what has made it so great. To see it in the past, 5 years go from 70 to 500 students weekly. But it's not been the program. I think it's been that culture. And for us, it's been a number of things. I would say we created common language year one, and then we re-updated it year 4 as a team, just to kind of put our values into stuff that's repeatable, tweetable. Everybody says it. Everybody knows it. And so we did that together as a team year one, said, what do we want to be about? What do we want worship? What do we want students to say when they talk about the time of, worship? What do we want students to say when they talk about our Sunday night gatherings? Like, you know what I mean? And so, so we got together, as a team, and I invited, at the time it was myself and one other full-time staff, and we invited some other key volunteers into that meeting, and we just hashed it out for a couple hours, you know what I mean? Like, just kind of going at what do we want people to say, and what kind of phrases are we going to repeat about our gatherings and about our ministry and about our small groups. And so we did a lot of hard work on that, and then we just repeated it, and we repeated it, and we repeated it, and we said it from stage and hosting and you know what I mean? And we used it in a hashtag. Yeah. So we kind of created a common language dictionary year one. And then just recently, year 4, we re-updated it, and we kind of said, hey, what stuff, kind of fizzled? What stuff is no longer true? What stuff maybe do we need to just update the language on? And so we've done that, and that kind of common language dictionary ends up getting put into print, given to leaders, given to staff, given in the onboarding process for new staff. And that's been important for creating and like establishing the culture amongst our leaders. Another thing that we've done is... Can
I ask another question about that before we move on?
Go for it. Yeah,
so it sounds like you create those values with like the students in mind, and what does it feel like for them? Because sometimes people will say, well, these are staff values or these are volunteer values, right? And they wouldn't be the kind of things you might say with students. So is there a couple examples you could give and give us an idea of what that was like? And I'm guessing this is different across different North Point area churches. Not like they all had the same ones.
It is. The cool thing is that there's enough autonomy at North Point. Everybody we all know the basic core value of, hey, we're going to be a church that unchurched people love to attend. And we're going to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. So those we don't mess with. But then when we're talking about like, what do we want our students to say about Sunday night? What do we want our leaders to say to students about Sunday night? And so, early on, we kind of grabbed onto that phrase, and lots of other people have grabbed onto it, the best night of the week. And so when we talk about,
social media.
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about Sunday night, we refer to it as the best night of the week. We welcome from stage in our hosting. Hey, welcome to the best night of the week. And so we wanted students to buy into that, and to believe that, hey, Sunday night's the best night of the week. And then, we would obviously be quick to point them to, it's not the best night of the week because some kid, ate something gross on stage, but it's the best night of the week because life change happens here, And so, that was one. Another one that's, so we talk about Inside Out as being a family. And something that we say regularly is, hey, if you're here, we want you to know that this family is for everyone. And so kind of repeating to students all the time, hey, this is a family and this family is for everyone. And so something unique that kind of happens in our gatherings is that whenever we pray, to close a service or during a worship segment or just really, anytime, our students, they all lock up, they put their arms on each other's shoulders. And everybody gets included. It's kind of really cool to see. And in that moment though, us saying, hey, we're going to pray, and wherever you're at with Jesus, we just want you to know, your family here, because this family's for everyone. Right.
Yeah.
And so
good.
that's another phrase that we've repeated, around when we've talked to our first timers, talking about the first time guest experience. We let our first time team know. We created common language. Hey, you own everything from the sidewalk to the service. And so that's kind of another phrase. They know, hey, we own sidewalk to service, all the way from the time people are walking in all the way until the service starts. Our first time team, they feel like owners. That's their space, right? Mm-hmm. So those are just some examples of language that we created. Another thing, when we talk to students about worship, all of our worship leaders get trained to kind of use the common language of, hey, the songs we sing affect the lives we live. So that's another phrase that we repeat over and over and over again when our worship leaders are talking about song setups. They're hey, we're going to sing this song. And the reason why we're going to sing this song is because the songs we sing affect the lives that we live. And we want you guys to live lives that trust in Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. So those are just some phrases and things like that we've kind of got in our common language dictionary, right?
Yeah, that's helpful. And you were headed somewhere before I interrupted you, though, to get some examples. But that was good. I wanted to hear some examples.
Yeah. No, I think the other thing that I was gonna another thing that we did early on is we kind of had an idea of an ideal of what we think a great small group leader will be. And so that's a part of our culture is small groups. It's small groups. We treat our small group leaders as the pastors of our student ministry. And so for us, we had this ideal of someone who is, who's humble and hungry and has got the sauce, you know what I mean? This is what we're looking for. We're looking for this kind of healthy leader who is pursuing students and not just showing up for an hour and checking it off the box. And so in order to continue to have that though, all the time, we have, weekly leader gatherings that happen an hour, before our actual gatherings.
Wow. Weekly?
Weekly. Yeah.
And
so
is this you're supposed to come to all of them, or you come to some, or what do you do there? I'm really intrigued by weekly hour-long trainings or gatherings.
Well, so the training may not always be an hour, but we ask the leaders to be there just early. So the first 15, 20 minutes might be we got, Smoothie King for you, or, it's just kind of just hang out. Leaders can drop their kids off at childcare, that type of stuff. And then when they get in, our actual meeting time is probably about 20, 25 minutes, typically. And then once a quarter, we'll do a full hour-long meeting, which will be an actual, more intense training. But yes, it's weekly gathering, in right there in the main room before the service. We'll gather with our leaders, and that's where we'll celebrate leaders that are really doing a great job. We'll give them, we created a little brand that we call the Mongrels, which is kind of like a hungry dog, you know what I mean? And so we created T-shirts and hats, And so when we see a leader on social media that's just been hustling to reach their students, they're at Waffle House at midnight after the football game, or they're at a student's play, or they showed up at an award ceremony, like we'll screenshot it and we'll put it up on the screens and we'll say, hey, that person, like, oh man, he was really being a mongrel this week, and we'll give him a t-shirt or we'll give him a hat and just really hype him up. It's almost like a player of the week type deal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's a way though that we've like instilled culture and like fought the drift. So
drift away from living out the culture you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Away from that, and because, the more leaders you get and the more years you do it, like there can be a drift, or even honestly, like just as the school year goes on and you get into the spring and everybody's tired and less kids are showing up and it's kind of a grind at that point. Like the way to fight the drift was we found kind of, doing some of these things where we celebrate these leaders and we make it a big deal when you're doing that. And we let them know, hey, we see you out there and that is amazing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's kind of just some fun ways that we've done to like help set and like keep the culture.
And so that is a part of me was thinking maybe the weekly leader gathering would kind of be like not required, or maybe you don't go to all of them. And I'm sure people miss here and there, but it's not that. Sure. It's like, hey, we want you to come to all the ones you can come to, especially if you're going to be here that week. And I guess attendance is pretty good, or you might not keep doing it.
We average around 80% of our leaders showing up, which to me is great. 80% of, you're talking 130 small group leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people would take 80% awesome if they were doing a one-off training, totally. Once in 6 months.
Exactly.
So weekly. Sure. Yeah. Take that too.
Yeah. And we've just found also, it's like, everybody's coming in and they've had whatever kind of week they've had and yada, yada, yada. When we ask them to be there just a little bit early, it's just a good like chance to just reset, you know what I mean? Like before you're about to have to be there in front of all the students. And so every training isn't like some intense thing. Sometimes it's literally just a celebrate. Sometimes it's just mingle and, hey, we want to connect some of our upperclassmen leaders with some of our underclassmen leaders. And so we'll do get to know you type stuff. I mean, sometimes it'll be just worship and prayer. So we try to keep them on their toes so that it feels worthwhile. And then we'll also bring in Jeff Henderson to do, a little session with them, or we'll bring in someone like a Stuart Hall or someone like that, just to pour into our leaders too. So we try to diversify like what we do with that time so that it's not just like, just the
same thing every week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about student leaders. And that's something you're passionate about. And I want to just first start with, what does it look like there? Like how, what does student leadership look like? How do you raise them up?
Yeah. So we kind of have two tiers of student leader in our student ministry. So we have like a large student leadership team that we call the collective, and it's a collective because it is a collective of students from every grade in any school in our area, and they'll apply for it. And that one's like a larger leadership team. So that one, we kind of cap it at about 25 students. And that one, they'll apply for it, they'll interview for it, and then they'll be selected. And that's a once a month commitment. So they'll commit to meet on a Wednesday night once a month to speak into some things, which I can break down here in a sec. And then the second tier, like kind of like even more, I guess, more intense. I don't know if that's what you call it, but would be our student interns. And these are students that it's for seniors only, and they will do it through either work-based learning at their school, or there's another kind of like internship type thing in Gwinnett County. It's called the Quest internship. And so basically they do this for school credit.
Okay. Yep.
And so they'll be with us Sunday through Thursday, like a work week. And they'll be with us from usually about noon to 4. And so they'll get to be a part of meetings. They'll get to kind of go to some staff meeting stuff. When we take our teams like on outings or to a conference, we include them in it, and that we cap at 4 students. And so we'll take 4 of those per year. And those are like the ones that are like interested in potentially wanting to do ministry at some capacity. And so those are kind of like our 2 tiers, you know what I mean? Like of student leadership.
And all 4 of the student interns, if you had 4, they're probably also in that other collective, right? Yes.
Yeah. So typically they were probably a part of the collective as sophomores and juniors. And then by the time they're seniors, we kind of have an idea of who we want to do that, you know? But every now and then, I mean, like this year, we were surprised with some of the students that applied and are going to do it. And we're really excited about it. So, so typically like this year, I think 16 applied and we took 4, which is awesome.
Yeah. What do they, I mean, maybe it's them and the collective, but what are some of the roles they do and the things they create?
Yeah. So the collective students, we kind of break them into a couple different teams, where they'll speak into, the big 3 buckets are like first time guest experience. And then the next one is like events and like Sunday night program. And then the next one is music.
Okay.
I already said the first time guest experience.
Yep,
sorry.
First time guest.
Yeah. First time guest. And then we have music and production. And then we have, like programming and special events. So the kids on the programming and special events will some of them will host like a Sunday night, or they might help us come up with like the games that we're going to do, or they might speak into, they'll create like all of our like, pre-service and post-service playlists that we'll do. Because I'm 34. So I'm like, how much longer am I going to be cool and knowing what's up with the music? But they know, they're 16, they're 15, and they can find the stuff and they can make, great playlists to be playing before and after service. And sometimes we'll have ones that go along with a series. And so those students are the ones that'll actually create those.
Okay. That's cool. And what, so they're picking one of those 3 teams or buckets or whatever. And then you said they meet once a month. And what is that? What do they do?
Yep. So in the once a month gathering, it's typically 2 hours. And what we'll do is, we'll take like 15 minutes just to kind of like get everybody whatever, like conversation going. We'll ask about their week, what all's been going on. And then we'll spend after those first 15 minutes, we'll take the next 45 minutes to do some kind of leadership exercise where we'll teach some of our core values for our student leaders. So we have a couple lessons that we do pretty regularly. One is we talk about strengthening our nets. So we use the passage, the story where Jesus calls the disciples to cast on the other side, and they start pulling it in and the nets start to break. And so we talked to all of our students. We're like, hey, we want to make sure that we keep everything Jesus sends our way. Every person Jesus sees our way, we don't want our nets to break. And so how do we make sure that we keep our nets strong? Where are we missing right now? And so we kind of are teaching our students, hey, be looking for where people might be falling through the cracks and help us keep that strong, right?
Yeah, that's great. And you do that once a year, or do you even bring that up multiple times?
Oh yeah, that lesson we'll go back to every single year, and we'll teach every new crop of students to be like, hey, we want you guys, y'all are going to be helping us keep our nets strong, right? So we have a couple lessons like that. I probably have 5 or 6 of those lessons that we'll teach almost every single year. Even if students have already heard it, they get a repeat of it because maybe in the course of the year, they noticed an area where we're not doing so great. So maybe our first time guest experience has been falling off, and they'll when we get to that lesson, they'll bring that up,
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And so we kind of have a set number of leadership lessons. And then, we'll also invite some other people in throughout the year to do some leadership lessons. So we'll spend that first 45 minutes after we've done a little mingler stuff. We'll do a leadership lesson. And then the second hour of our gathering together is them getting into their teams and kind of like getting to create and have a voice and start speaking into things.
That's good. Yeah, I figured there was a place where, their voice would be heard and they get to help influence some of that, which is good.
Yeah, that whole second hour, they'll break into their teams and they'll kind of, they'll start speaking into social media, like, we should be doing, we should do some more polls, or we should do, you know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. We saw this great idea, or, have you guys seen this meme? It's like really popular. Like Inside Out needs to be doing something with that. And so they'll immediately, they'll start spitting out ideas, and we'll give them the place to start doing that. And then also speaking into our program, we'll say, hey, our next series is going to be this. And so we'll tell them what the series is. What kind of hosting could we do? What kind of look and feel could we do? And then also, from time to time, we're asking them, hey, what are we missing in our content? What are we not talking about that we should be talking about? And so they'll get to speak into all that kind of stuff, which is really fun. And then for special events and things like that, they'll come up with the themes. They'll let us know, hey, this is a really popular look right now, or Old Town Road is like the best song ever. We should do a rodeo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they'll let us know and kind of help us theme out things like our back to school bash or things of that nature. And so it's good to give them that voice. And then when they see it played out, they're like, oh, I spoke into that. I helped create that. And their level of buy-in for wanting to bring their friends to an event that they helped create is so much higher,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
and you talk about giving students a voice, and is this exactly what you mean, or is there even more to it than that?
Oh yeah. So that the leadership side is a part of it. Another thing that we've just found is that if I'm as the pastor, or if myself and a couple of our staff are the only voices that they're seeing on stage, students will eventually be like, well, I've heard most of what Reed has to say. Right. And especially in the course of 4 years, or sometimes, if you're doing high school and middle school in the course of 7 years, they're kind of like, how many life stories do I have that are exciting to start off a sermon? You know what I mean? And so they're like, oh yeah, we've already heard that one about you and your brother. And you're like, dang, you have, And so what we've been trying to do, and what we've found to be really great, is we've been spending a lot more time helping students to articulate their own testimony and their own faith stories, and trying to carve out lots of time throughout the year for students to testify to other students as a part of the main service. And so that's another place where we're giving students the opportunity to find their voice,
What does it look like in terms of how often is that happening? And I'm thinking, is it on stage, like an interview, or is it a video? What does it look like?
So we diversify it, but so what we do is we do once a month, we do baptism night at Inside Out, and those baptisms, the students share their testimony live. And then we work with them, obviously, to help them. So we give ourselves a month to kind of meet with these students and help them to craft their story in a way that it can be shared in 2 minutes, And so we'll do baptisms once a month. That's one area where students share their story. Another thing that we do is we try to once a month have a student involved in either hosting, or if they're not hosting the night. And when we say hosting, that means like getting up, welcoming everyone, leading the game, setting up worship. You know what I mean? Like, so they're literally, MC the night, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then another thing that we will do is instead of having a worship leader set up a song, we've been using student testimonies to set up worship songs. And so we'll have a student, maybe it's a student who the student's already been baptized, but in the past year, they really went through something and God brought them through to the other side, or there's a specific song that goes along with something that a student has currently been dealing with. And so we'll let that student get up, share their story, and kind of tie in the lyrics to the song. and it'll be like a song set up instead of just the worship leader being like, all right, guys, y'all know, like, our God is great. So let's sing, like, and so we'll use, students, give them the opportunity to do that. And it's been really, really powerful. Like it's so amazing. And the more that students see themselves sharing, the more others are going, hey, I've got a testimony. I've got a story. I want to take that step. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And or this place is for me, like
exactly,
even if they're newer, you're just like, oh,
yes, exactly.
I felt the same way or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Like seeing one another, like seeing themselves in one another's stories has been so powerful. And then another thing that we do, and we do it, this is now every year, the Sunday after Thanksgiving break is a night that we call it Testify. And the whole night is stories and songs. And so that night there will be like probably 8 different students that will share, and then there'll be like worship in between. And so it'll be like story, song, story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that night is like, now it's honestly, it's one of our highest attended Sundays on a night that normally before we started doing this, it used to be super low attended,
Yeah, or I know a lot of ministries don't have student ministry that Sunday night if they do Sunday night. Yeah.
Because it's typically so low attended. And now, like this past year, we were up that Sunday like 140 students from normal, because all these students are like, the ones who are sharing are like, I got to be back to share. And then they're telling all their friends like, hey, I'm going to be sharing something that's really important to me, or I'm going to be sharing my faith story for the first time in front of, everybody. And I'd love it if you would be there. And so we end up seeing a ton of students that don't actually normally come to church coming in support of their friend, which is awesome,
Yeah, that is. Yeah, so that's great.
That's just been some ways that we give students a voice. And then, we're trying to get students involved in production, and we're trying to get them involved in the worship team. We hold auditions so that they can, start having a voice in those areas. But pretty much everywhere that you can serve besides being a high school small group leader, we're trying to get students involved in those places.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about Hallway Hustle, which is just a great phrase. And I know it relates to reaching students where they are, but tell us about that.
Yep. So Hallway Hustle is I guess it's like our vernacular for what I guess Orange would say is time on their turf, right? Mm-hmm. And so for us, Hallway Hustle is getting into schools and being at places where students are outside of the church. And so, like for me, the Hallway Hustle started by going to school lunches, and I was like, this is when I hustle these hallways at North Gwinnett High School or at whatever high school I was at the time, Lanier or Mill Creek High School. When I would be there, I'm like, that paid off and has paid off so much in getting to meet students, see them where they're at, let them know that we don't just care about them on Sundays. We tell our leaders all the time, hey, what you sow Monday through Saturday, you reap on Sunday. And so when leaders are telling us, hey, conversation has been like kind of dead in our small group on Sunday, my first question is, well, how have you shown up Monday through Saturday? And typically if conversation or if small group attendance or if things like that are lacking on a Sunday, I can trace it back to how were you showing up Monday through Saturday? And that's our Hallway Hustle. And so we kind of call anything that involves you going to a sporting event or going to a school or going to a play or an award, ceremony or anything like that. We call that kind of Hallway Hustle, and we celebrate it big,
Do you think because I think when people are listening to that, and that is a lot of leaders, that's what they want. Yeah. And some leaders are just great. They're going to do it. But if you really want a culture of it, where like most of your leaders are doing it, do you think it is the celebrating of it and those volunteer gatherings that helps get other people to do it? Or do you do other things that are even more intentional to to push leaders out there to do it? Like, hey, when you sign up, this is part of the deal. You know what I mean? How do you train them and encourage them to do that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it starts with your selection process. For us, we're unapologetically picky about who gets to be a small group leader. And I know the tension because for sure I have, worked in where I had 11 students and it was just me and there's nobody else and I have no budget money. And so I know the grind, you know what I mean? Of like, gosh, I just need someone else to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, when you're kind of like in those situations, I totally know that like sometimes it is tempting to settle for warm bodies. But I just want to give everybody that's listening, youth pastor, volunteer, whatever, like the permission to be picky in your selection. Because that's where it starts, is finding the people that really they're a healthy, growing person, but they're hungry to want to reach students. And you'll know that in the interview process,
Yeah. And you're clear too and tell them that's what's expected. That's
a part of it. Yeah. That's the expectation from us on the front end, which is this. I mean, it sounds crazy what we ask. We tell them on the front end, our expectation is that you serve for 4 years. So you start with a freshman group and you see them through graduation. And so you're committing to the best of your knowledge, obviously, to 4 years. And we tell them, hey, this is not just a Sunday night commitment, because the success of Sunday night will depend on what you do Monday through Saturday.
And
so they
know. And retreats and
it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah.
We tell people in orientation for serving with high school, we tell them on the front end, we're like, hey, we just want you to know, this is the Navy SEALs of volunteering at Gwinnett Church. I mean, it really is. Great. And I mean, we're obviously, we let them know. We don't just want to scare them off, but we want to be upfront. We're like, hey, this is a big commitment. And on the other side of it, though, it is so rewarding when you've invested and you've walked with a student for 4 years and you've shown up in their life for more than just an hour on Sunday, but you've shown up in their life outside of there, and you had Waffle House at 12 o'clock at night with them and their other friend who were at a party that they shouldn't have been at, and you went and picked them up. You know what I mean? Like when you're that person in their life, on the other side is just the reward is, I mean, you can't even measure it. It's unbelievable. And so, but it's a big commitment. It's a lot. And I think celebrating them along the way 100% like helps in that process though, as well, like keeping them inspired. Something that our groups directors do, it's a big part of their job, is making sure that we document stories. And when I say that, I mean like
leader
stories
and like the impact and all that. Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. And just like student stories of life change, moments where a student took a big step of faith. We are meticulous about finding and documenting stories so that anytime we're together with leaders, we're going, hey, like I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it's worth it, but let me tell you about what happened with this kid over here, or let me tell you about what Tyler said the other day, or did you guys remember 2 weeks ago when this student took this step and got baptized? That's because of you're there. You know what I mean? Like, and so we are meticulous. We document them. We have a Google Doc of just stories.
And you just keep filling it up, and then you go back in there.
And we keep filling them up. And we'll pretty regularly throughout the year ask leaders to submit stories, and then we'll bring them back up and to the leaders, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I had forgotten that had happened because it's been a horrible month. You know what I mean? Like, and then you'll remind them of a story that they submitted,
Yeah.
And they'll be awesome. In tears, and they're like, they're going, oh, thank you for remembering that, because I needed to remember that,
Mm-hmm. So, well, let's wrap up with just a little bit about teaching, and what would you say to help youth leaders who want to know how to teach better to students?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think, gosh, it's one of the things that I think I get questions about the most, not necessarily because I'm good. I think it's more because people are just, they want to know, you know what I mean? How they can get better. I think the simplest answer would be, hey, prep. You know what I mean? Like, give it the time that it deserves to prepare. And I know people are like, gosh, I just don't have the time. I'm like, but I would just say, hey, preparation is big. So I would say spending time with your Bible and spending time with students is some of the best ways to get good content.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you spend, like, you know, spending time in the Bible is going to prepare you for what God has to say. And then spending time with students is going to help you to figure out how to articulate that, or what actually they need to hear, you know? But then I would say for practical, you know, like steps, I think getting lots of reps. So going to FCAs and offering yourself up. I mean, goodness gracious, when I moved into Gwinnett, I emailed every FCA director at the local high schools within 20 miles of our church. And so I sent an email to like 10 different FCA directors and just let them know, hey, I'm a youth pastor in the area. I'm serving the same students as you. If there's anything I can do to help, I would love to. And a lot of them are just looking for any kind of help that they can get. And so they'll email you back. And so getting those reps, though, is hugely important for getting better at speaking to students. And then I think also diversify who you're listening to. So a lot of people are, you know, they listen to the same two podcasts and then they just start sounding like, you know, whoever it is that's out there that's popular, you know, Louis or Rich Wilkerson or Stephen Furtick or whoever those guys are that are really popular right now. And then you just listen to that one person do their one thing. And at best, you're going to be a B version of that person. But if you want to be an A version of yourself, if you diversify who you're listening to, not just preachers either, I would say some of the best people to listen to, go listen to stand-up comedy. Yeah. I mean, really, those guys hold people's attention and they know how to transition through ideas. They're brilliant. And if you can get past some of the vulgarity of it, you know what I mean? Like, and if you can get past some of that, there are some great nuggets of wisdom on how to communicate to people by just diversifying who you're listening to. And then the other thing that I would say is seek feedback. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest ones that none of us like to do. We don't like to record ourselves and listen to it. We definitely don't like to record ourselves and have someone else listen to it and pick at it, you know. But I think having some safe people, even, you know, it doesn't have to be another person in ministry. It could be, you know, whatever, your wife or your husband or a close friend or someone else at the church, you know, and let them listen to your talk and run it by them, maybe run it by them beforehand, or ask somebody to record you on iPhone when you preach at that FCA or something like that and get feedback. Because sometimes, you know, we're looking at it and we're like, I don't understand why I'm not connecting, and someone else hears it and they're like, hey, that was weird, or that was awkward, or that was clunky, or that was great. You should do that more, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think, yeah, to me, inviting feedback, actually seeking it out, is a huge way to get better at speaking to students. So, I mean, is that helpful?
Oh yeah, definitely. So it sounds like you all write your own content. Is that true? Or do you share some things sometimes across campuses, or?
I mean, we definitely collaborate. There's once every 2 week meeting where all the kind of the directors or, you know, youth pastors from all the different campuses get together and we'll speak into what we're going to preach on. And so that'll be, you know, everybody kind of like speaking and picking. And for me, that's a great place to get feedback and to give feedback and to be sharpened. But when you don't have those, you know, if you don't have a table like that, I think you can create that table by finding just some people around you, even if it's, you know, a student is a part of that, you know what I mean? Like, and getting some people around just to bump some ideas and bounce some ideas off of, you know?
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, everybody's different, and this is oddly specific question, but how much time do you think you spend in a week on a message that you're preaching? You know, that Sunday. I know you're going to speak every week.
Yep.
What's it look like for you when you are teaching?
man, it would be, I would say like ideally, like an ideal week would be like 8 to 10 hours would be awesome of my week being spent on prep. What is it like all the time? Do I always get that much time? No, but typically my prep rhythm is on a Monday, I will do like all my like, my study. So that's just me I got my passage. I'm making observations. I'm just writing down things that come to me. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of like, I don't necessarily have a flow yet. Mm-hmm. It's just me just gathering information, and I'm writing it all down on a note. And maybe I'm thinking through like, oh, that'd be a cool way to say this, or this is a good phrase, or that was a great observation that I read in that commentary. So that would be my Monday. And then I give it probably 2 days to kind of breathe and marinate, Yeah. And then Thursday, I'm back to my notes. And Thursday, I'm like actually like plugging it into my normal flow. And everybody has their own skeleton that they work with, if you're Judah Smith, you read the passage and then you pray for the Seahawks, and then then after that, you know what I mean? Like then you tell a story, and then you describe the passage, and then you land the plane. I think, for me, having worked at North Point for the past 5 years, kind of our flow has been, when we're thinking through a talk outline, we go connection, tension, truth, application. That's kind of my buckets that I fill in with all of my study. And so connection will be that, that opening, like how am I connecting with my audience, introducing the idea of what we're going to talk about. Tension, I'm asking what's the problem? Like what is the issue that we're wanting to address that evening? Why should they care about what I'm about to say? And then the truth, we're going to unpack the scripture. We're going to teach what it says. And then the application is going to be, what do I want you to do? And it may not always be like some like go and forgive somebody. It may just be, hey, this week you need to think about this, or you need to pray about this, or you know what I mean? But there's some sort of action oriented something. That's kind of typically how I'm thinking through a talk. So I'll take all my stuff from Monday that I've gathered, and by Thursday I'm plugging it into kind of my buckets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then fine tuning it and making it actually flow and all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And then Saturday night I'll throw it all away and rewrite the whole thing. But,
Yep. I hear you.
Typically it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad we were able to get through, most of those topics and talk about that. And that was really, really helpful. I appreciate that. And what an exciting time for you, wrapping up time at Gwinnett. Man. This Sunday is the recording, and then starting at Passion. That's just going to be awesome. And
thank you, man.
Congrats for the good work, the thing you've built there at Gwinnett, and what you're going to continue working on at Passion, the influence they have. We were talking before we recorded. It's just amazing. I've said to friends before, I'm a little bit older than you, but and the Passion influence in kind of the 18 to 25 group has just been there for so long. But so amazing now to look back at like people who are my age or maybe even a little older, a little younger, and just it's hard. You could never even figure it out. But the influence church wide, or certainly in the U.S., is just amazing, because now a lot of them are lead pastors and a lot of them are their staff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
wow.
You could never measure that, but it's just got to be incredible, which is really cool. So it's exciting.
I'm excited.
You'll get to be part of that, which is a lot of fun. How can people connect with you if they just have any questions or anything like that? If they want to follow on social media or something like that?
Yeah, I was about to say, I guess the main, I don't really use Facebook that much. So, Instagram, it's readmore07, and people can reach out to me through that. They can direct message me on there. I don't have my new Passion email yet, so I would give that out. But right now, I think Instagram is probably the easiest way to reach out and connect, follow, and they can direct message me on there. And I'd love to connect. I love just any way that I can help, and then also any way that I can learn from what other people are doing. I think it's great.
Awesome. Well, Reed, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, there you go. What an awesome guy. Loved this interview with Reed. Didn't really know him, before this interview. I'd met him once when I toured Gwinnett Church after the facility there was first built. But really enjoyed this podcast interview. Wish him the greatest success at Passion City Church. How cool is it to be a part of student ministry in two just amazing, healthy, influential, difference-making churches there around Atlanta. That's really cool. 3 action items I think of coming out of that interview. One would be to create your own key language. What's the cultural language you're going to use? The phrases. I love the ones he shared as an example. What are some ones you can use and repeat and repeat and repeat so that people get it and it kind of creates the culture you want? We've had a few folks on here in student ministry talking about student ministry leadership and creating that within their student ministry. We're even changing some things this year in light of the things I've learned with these interviews this year. But one thing that I thought about might be a good action step is if you have student ministry leadership or you're thinking about doing that, what if they apply for it like he talked about? Or maybe you'll even have the 2 levels, that he talked about there. The third action step, and we're taking this one too, is to share more stories. How can you share more stories at your student ministry events and gatherings and be, just on top of getting them regularly, saving them? I think, what did he say? They save them in a Google Doc or something like that. Pretty simple. But how can you share more stories? I think that'd be really, really powerful. As I mentioned in the beginning, make sure you subscribe to the email, which you can get in the show notes, nickblevins.com/episode 159, to get that video, that vision casting video that I just love. You'll want to see that for sure. You'll also be able to get the programming checklist from Kyle in there, and then sign up for Volunteer Boot Camp, Wednesday, August 28th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 or 6 sessions, all about recruiting, training, onboarding, encouraging, retaining volunteers, which we all want to do really well. I'm sure we're going to give a bunch of stuff away, but if it's me, I'm signing up and I'll be there. I'll be listening to all these great communicators because I want to learn more about how to lead and care for volunteers. So make sure you don't miss that. Thanks for listening. Thanks always for sharing the podcast, for using it. I really hope it helps make a difference in your ministry. Thanks for emailing me. Some of you email me to tell me what you're doing with it, how you're applying it, what episodes stood out to you. And I just love that. I love hearing that. I even love hearing ideas. If you have things you think of coming out of episodes or something you've applied, I want to hear that too. Email me at nick@nickblevins.com. But thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great week, and I'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.